After returning to the United States from the Soviet Union, Margaret's husband Caldwell was pressuring her to have a child. She, however, valued her independence and career too much at that point and wanted to continue covering the war. As a result, her husband filed for divorce and the couple split. Soon afterwards, Margaret returned to England for an assignment photographing American B-17 bombers heading for war. In 1942, she then got permission to join a combat mission in North Africa. While on her way there, though, her ship was torpedoed. She survived, escaping on a lifeboat, and the ordeal only made her even more famous to the public. In fact, Alfred Hitchcock's 1944 film Lifeboat is widely thought to have been inspired by her story. She also did eventually make it to North Africa, where in 1943 Life magazine published her cover story entitled, "Life's Bourke White Goes Bombing." As World War II wound to a close in Europe in 1945, Margaret was traveling through a collapsing Germany with General George S. Patton when the notorious concentration camp Buchenwald was liberated. Once again, Margaret-Bourke White found herself on the front lines of history, a witness to one of the 20th century's most brutal events. As she wrote later of her experience of the camp, "Using a camera was almost a relief. It interposed a slight barrier between myself and the horror in front of me." After returning from the war, Margaret would go on to produce a book, Dear Fatherland, Rest Quietly. It was a book that attempted to portray the brutalities she had witnessed during World War II, and her anger over the American indifference to the moral implications of war. Margaret-Bourke White continued working after World War II, continuing to produce more documentary photography and covering big world events like the Korean War and the partition of India. She once again kept finding herself in the right place at the right time to witness momentous points of the 20th century. She interviewed and photographed Mahatma Gandhi just hours before his assassination, taking what was probably the last photograph of him. In 1953, while covering the Korean War, Margaret first started noticing the symptoms of what would later be diagnosed as Parkinson's disease. The disease quickly made it very hard for Margaret to work, and despite getting several operations to help with her tremors, the results were somewhat short-lived. She made her last photo essay for life, called Megalopolis, in 1957. By 1969, she had to give up her photography altogether and essentially retire to her home in Darien, Connecticut, where she passed away on August 27, 1971. Despite her death at the relatively young age of 67, Margaret reflected in her autobiography, Portrait of Myself, "I wouldn't want to change any of my life, even if I had the chance, because it's been the life I wanted. I think I've been particularly fortunate. Even my 2 broken marriages and the illness have been important to my own growth and development." By the end of her life, Margaret-Bourke White had not only been a pioneer in fields such as industrial photography, but had published dozens of photo essays for Life magazine, as well as 11 books on an array of subjects. Today, Margaret-Bourke White images are held in many museums around the world, as well as in the Library of Congress, and she will forever be remembered as one of the most important photographers of the 20th century.